may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now is your chance to, well, we've warned you.
Ow! What big eyes you have, the kind of eyes that drive most mad. So just to see that you don't get chased, I think I ought to walk with you for a ways. What full lips you have, they sure look someone bad. So until you get to Grandma's place, I think you ought to walk with me and be safe.
So, ladies and gentlemen, it is still day 2 of Commentaries of the Night, and we are here to do a little bonus commentary, a little addendum to our discussion on the 1931 version of Dracula starring Bela Lugosi and a bunch of other British people. Dylan McCandless, Super DM64, still with me.
Yes, indeed.
This is the one series, though, where you might get, like, horribly murdered in some kind of terrible, you know, monstrous accident or something. Because this is the horror one, you know? This is the one that's Halloween-oriented. One of us might die and have to... The other one will have to go on alone. I mean, we won't, presumably, because there's no danger in just sitting here watching movies, but you never know. The atmosphere is there.
You remember a few years ago when you decided to use the word spooktacular in the title of a video, and do you remember how just utterly disappointed with you I was?
No, a little. Was that an SOS thing?
I don't remember. Was that SOS or DFLS? I just remember that you used the spooktacular. I was like,
well,
real original.
The word spook is so like that word has been ruined in history, so it's already a problematic word, you know. Like in the old trailers for the Abbott and Costello movies, when they met the Universal monsters, that like they would be like, Abbott and Costello meet the spooks, and I'm like, the wording there is a little, it turns some heads, you know.
Really? Is that a derogatory term?
Yeah.
Spook?
Oh yeah.
For who?
For people who are dead, of course. You silly. No, it's a term for African American folks.
I should have guessed. They have all the terms, don't they?
They have most of the terms. It's like at night they have dark skin so that you can't see them. That's. Do you not use Urban Dictionary? Like, fuck, dude.
Well, is this a northern thing?
I don't think so. It seems more like a southern thing to me, calling anybody that term, any kind of term
listen,
like that.
I mean, listen, there are a million terms that you can use derogatorily towards people of an African descent. I've never come across spook used in that context in my day-to-day life.
That's
I've actually
crazy.
I've actually on a couple times, like in movies and things, you heard it used as a term for like G-men, you know, like suits, like fucking like Men in Black looking motherfuckers that show up, you know.
Yeah, you know what I think I've also heard like MI5 operatives called spooks. You know.
Yeah.
You know, so listen. I'm not saying that just using that term immediately makes you a racist. I'm saying that it makes the potential for racist-based humor all the easier. And in that instance, you and I will always take advantage of it, correct?
It's a weird one because traditionally ghosts are portrayed as being white.
Yeah, you're right. It's an interesting contradiction. And that contradiction is at the basis of all humanity. I think it's interesting we opened on this conversation about racism and racial slurs because tonight we're talking about a version of Dracula that was made for a people of different hereditary and ethnic descent than what the studio perceived as the audience for the Dracula movie they were already making. So Dylan, what are we talking about tonight?
I had to try really hard there to not say something else when you were like, "This was the version made for," and I almost said, the one word that offends Andres.
Oh my god.
No, apparently it was a common practice in the early 30s at this time to produce foreign language versions of your films alongside the English version. And so today we're going to be talking about the Spanish version of Dracula, which was actually filmed on the same sets and everything as the English version of Dracula. It was what would happen is they would film the English version during the day, and then the Spanish people would take over the set during the night, and for the duration. And it's an interesting story because it's actually in many respects superior to the English version. It's longer in runtime, even though it follows the same beats. I think that has a lot to do with like cinematography and things, because there's a lot
the
more.
cinematography is the thing that's the most different. Because the plot is the same.
Yeah, it's a really interesting comparison, and they make for a neat companion to one another, and that's why we're gonna cover it here tonight.
Indeed. Who was the director on this? It was directed by George Melford, a very traditional Hispanic name.
Yes, and the Dracula in this version is played by a name that I learned
Carlos
in preparation.
Villarreal.
Yeah, Villarreal, I think it's pronounced.
Yeah, that.
That's how the chick on the special features on the Blu-ray pronounces it anyway. Carlos Villarreal. And he is not a bad Dracula. He just sort of pales in comparison to Lugosi. That's really the one huge area where this movie lags, is that...
Because he's trying too hard to be Lugosi.
Yeah, as good as the actors in it are, he's not Lugosi, and the guy who plays Van Helsing is no Eddie Van Sloan. But I mean, other than that, it's better in almost every other respect. So.
Well, I barely remember it myself. I only watched a little bit of it when I got it, because it comes as a special feature on the Universal Legacy, like all the Universal Legacy versions of Dracula. So I had it. But because it's so similar, I was like, why am I going to watch this whole thing? I'm not Spanish.
Yeah, and
it wasn't made for Spain. It was made for Mexico. More primarily. And for the Hispanic speaking audiences in America.
Yes. What I'd like to know is, though, did they make Spanish language versions for the other Universal monster movies? And if so, why do we never hear about them if they did?
I think that trend died.
Did dubbing come around by this point? So they were like, who's going to film a whole nother movie? Fuck that.
Well, but you've also got to remember there was a silent version of the 1931 Dracula as well. So I think their thought process was subtitles was the way to go. Just keeping the whole intertitles thing going.
Yeah, that's a good point. I forgot about that. They used to have to do silent versions of early sound films.
Because not every theater was capable of doing sound yet.
Yeah, so some people would have gone and watched a version of Lugosi Dracula where, it would be a silent movie. Like, it would cut away to an intertitle every now and then. And that blows my mind.
Why are these people's lips moving so slowly?
Why are they enunciating
because
everything?
Because in silent movies, when people talk, it's always like super fast, and it's like, but in Dracula, they would be more slow and exaggerated because they're actually speaking.
Yeah, well, you can also tell in a lot of silent movies that they're not even trying to say what
pantomime,
what the title card says.
It's just pantomime, or just sounds. It's like in season 3 of Doctor Who when the Doctor is on the video screen just yammering on, and Martha's not listening to it. She's saying stuff, and we can just see that he's just rambling about nothing. And you can see it in the deleted scenes as well. Anyway.
It'd also be a really shitty silent movie because it's got that early talky cinematography. So
parts of it would be good because it's quiet and more just moody. But then, the parts where people start talking would be horrible because it goes on and on and on.
Watching the Lugosi Dracula without the novelty of, look, they make noise now. I just don't think that would work.
Mm-hmm. And it's not even that much of obviously to you and I, there's no novelty to that. So that's why that movie is so problematic now. So the question will the more visually oriented Spanish version hold up better. Because I don't really remember it well enough to come
I'm
down
sure,
on that now. It's all conjecture, all theory.
There's one thing that I'm sure probably still comes across really good in the silent version, and that's 3 of the performances. Dwight Frye, particularly after he goes crazy, Bela Lugosi, obviously, and Eddie Van Sloan, because all of them are doing that sort of over-the-top, very dramatic sort of body language and things like that.
The charm of Dracula is something that would be missing from the silent version, though. Because that's a big difference from Lugosi's version to Nosferatu and even, like, Christopher Lee's Dracula. So that's another big thing you're missing.
Even Spanish Dracula, as we're about to see, he tries to be charming like Lugosi, but he just comes across kind of creepy.
Well, we'll see. Why don't we not waste any more time? So presumably you have it out at 000, both Dylan and the audience, I mean. And, it's available on pretty much every home release of Dracula at this point, so it should be pretty easy to get out and get ready to go to watch with us. So
you can always count on me. You can always count on me to have it out.
That's what I've always liked about you, Dylan. So let's press play for the Spanish version of Dracula from 1931 in 3, 2, 1, play. Well, this is off to a good start. It's completely black, and it looks exactly the same as the original, the one that we watched like a week ago, even though
I'm looking.
the people would have watched it earlier today.
Bill, we might have a problem. Are you watching the movie already? Because I'm looking at the Universal logo.
Did I click on the wrong movie? I think I did.
What's your run time? Because if it's not an hour 43, you're looking at the American version.
Oh, fuck, I clicked on the wrong movie. Alright, that's embarrassing. Well,
open the right one, get it to 000.
I can't believe I did that.
This looks exactly like the other one.
Fuck you. It's an honest mistake.
I don't know why the Universal logo is on this one and not the other one. That's
yeah,
weird.
the other one just starts. That's the weird thing. Alright, I got it now. I'm seeing
Okay.
I see the black and white version of the modern Universal logo. Van Helsing style.
That's not distracting at all.
No, none whatsoever.
Alright, so I'm at 000 if you want to do your little countdown again.
Yeah, my little countdown. You're so demeaning. Alright, so now we are really ready to get into Dracula from 1931, the Spanish version, where they weren't speaking American, the language that Jesus spoke. Let's press play in 3, 2, 1, play.
They will be speaking Spanish, the language that Jesus spoke.
Right.
So here we have a black and white rendition of the modern Universal logo. This actually
a
always
fascinating
kind of
piece of history. Well, it's not the modern Universal logo. This is the one from like the early 2000s. So this is a relic now.
So this one thing I didn't like when I finally upgraded to like a DVD of Jurassic Park is that now I have the new Universal logo on it, and like I always liked when I would watch my old VHS of Jurassic Park, the mid '90s super shitty globe, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then by the time you get to 3, it's this one. So Dylan, I just realized a massive problem with this movie.
In Spanish?
Yeah, it's not in English. I think that's a huge misstep on their part. They really should have looked at themselves closely when they were coming up with the concept for this and been like, you know what our real misstep here is? It's not in English.
Yeah, and I mean, on the one hand, you might say, well, it was made for a Spanish-speaking audience. Well, why didn't they just learn English, and then we wouldn't have had to film 2 movies?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's really what I'm saying here. Because everybody in the world just needs to get caught up with where we're at, and then we'll all be fine. Because then we can all appreciate Bela Lugosi's performance. No. So far, it's pretty similar. Although the title, there was no title card. There was actual footage behind the titles, which is I guess more interesting. It was, I guess, cinematography wise, that was an example of how it's already better. Hey, look, it's Spanish version of the lady who hosted the special in the 90s about this movie.
So reportedly, there is a reason why this movie is so much better.
What I read online
Because I don't want Spanish people, all right, to listen to this commentary and be like, of course it's better. We've made it. No, there's a reason behind this. Basically, what
people in
happened
Spain
was,
didn't make it anyway.
Spanish-speaking people, I should have said. Basically, what happened was, because they were filming at night, they had the opportunity. The director at least did, and Carlos Villarreal, they had the opportunity to look at the dailies and shit of what had been filmed by the English-speaking people just earlier that day, and so they actually challenged themselves to make it better. So it's really easy to make something more visually interesting when you have the other persons to look at and be like, oh, let's do this differently and that differently. It wasn't just a matter of them happening to make something more interesting. There was actually a bit of a pride thing going into it. They would look at what the other guys had done and they would say, that's pretty good. I think we can do it better though, and I gotta admire that.
Do you think that the English audience looked at the English production looked at what they were doing?
I doubt it.
It doesn't seem so, does it? Because if so, maybe Dracula from 31 would hold up better.
I don't think they ever would have, white people.
Right. A lot of these people look white. There are apparently a lot of long shots that are just used from the English version, so...
Yeah, I imagine that was a cost-saving measure because I can't imagine Universal gave them a full budget for this movie.
No,
I mean, on the one hand,
I have read earlier that it's a smaller budget.
I mean, on the one hand, it's already inherently cheaper because they get to reuse all of the sets and costumes and things.
Do you think they got actors that were all the same size as the English actors they had, and they were just wearing the same costumes?
I imagine they must have gotten at least similar sized people, yeah. How are you supposed to tell who's the monster in this movie when everybody's speaking that devil's tongue?
Yeah. So far, Spanish Redfield is not impressing me. Renfield is in like Resident Evil. So far, Hispanic Renfield is not impressing me. He just looks like he kind of reminds me of the lawyer from Jurassic Park, who I don't really think is supposed to be Hispanic, but he kind of looks. He just reminds. He has that cadence about himself.
Yeah, to be fair, Dwight Fry wasn't really that impressive in this part of the movie either. It's only once he goes crazy that his performance really starts to stand out.
He was likable and engaging, though. This guy is just... He looks like any Hispanic like lawyer or doctor where you're like, oh yeah, you're very nice, but thank you, please leave me alone.
Actually, reminds me, I recently heard that Harvey Dent in the animated series was supposed to be black. I never got that at all as a kid. I thought he looked like Italian or something.
Wait, in Batman the Animated Series?
Yeah, I heard that apparently he was supposed to be black, and I guess I can see it in hindsight. But it's kind of like a Lex Luthor.
He is so not. What?
That's what I heard. I don't know.
Maybe that was
Maybe
that was the intention because it was based on '89 and Batman Returns when they were planning on having.
That's what I'm thinking too.
When they were planning on having Billy D. Williams be Two-Face, but
because the same thing happened.
When I watched Batman TASD, that's a white guy.
Because the same thing happened in Superman TAS. Lex Luthor in that movie is very racially ambiguous. It was years before I realized, wait, is he supposed to be black? I just thought he was really tan.
I can see. You know what? In season 4, I can see it, but in like the early stuff, he looks Italian to me.
You know what the problem is? They don't use a dark enough pencil.
I'm literally looking up the ethnicity of Harvey Dent in Batman TAS right now.
Was he supposed to be black? I really think
Apparently
that it was
this
just
is
a matter
a point of contention online.
I just don't think they used a dark enough color when they were coloring that show because he just looks tan, you know? I didn't mean to go on like a huge tangent here. It was just you were talking about how Renfield looked kind of racially ambiguous, and it reminded me of that. Uh,
Huh. This is... people were like, nobody knows. He's just darker skinned.
the same thing with Lex though in Superman TAS, isn't it? Like
He's more overtly dark skinned though. And he sounds black, even though he's not voiced by a black guy.
it's true.
So I think the problem with Carlos Villarreal is that he's caught in this middle ground between trying too hard to be Bela Lugosi and not being Bela Lugosi.
It's weird.
He never gets to he never gets to carve his own identity.
He's not a bad Dracula. It's just he's in the shadow of this infinitely better Dracula.
Right.
But it's weird because he's in a much better looking movie. Like if you swapped them, if Bela Lugosi was in this version, or if the English version was filmed the way that this one is, it would be no contest. That would be the ideal version.
And speaking of like,
see what I mean? He's trying to do that like hypnotic thing that Bela Lugosi does.
But he doesn't have the eyes for it. You know what else I find interesting? So they don't attempt to like change the location of any of the characters or even the ethnicity of the characters to make the ethnicity of the actors make sense. Like Count Dracula is still in Transylvania.
Right. Well, a couple of the names are changed, at least. Mina in this version is called Ava, and
okay, well that's good.
And Lucy is called Lucia.
Well, Jonathan Harker is fine. Van Helsing is not fine.
Yeah, I think the names that were more essential to the story, more iconic, stayed the same. But like the minor characters, they swapped them over to Spanish.
Yeah, I guess even Dracula you can get away with, but like Dracula should have been like an Italian count or a Spanish count even. Not they should have changed it. But it's the same.
Yeah. Well,
because it has to line up with the version they're already making.
Well, it's also because partially they're saving a whole lot of money by, using the same sets and things.
And by using a shittier bat. That didn't look nearly as good as the other version. That's the same as the English version, though. That shot.
Yeah. The moment where it starts to sink in, like, oh, that's way better cinematography, is coming up here in a minute. It's when he actually is introduced to Dracula on the staircase.
Because so far it's been largely the same.
Yeah, there's this great shot that we'll see here in a minute, because in the English version he just sort of turns around and he looks surprised, and then we cut to Dracula. In this one, there's like this pan and zoom, and it's really, really well done. There was a cinematography Oscar in 1931. It probably should have won it.
Wasn't there?
I don't know. Were the Oscars a thing yet?
Pretty sure.
They're like, what, 70-something years?
I have no idea. But yeah, what do you think? Do you think it's fine to just have these Hispanic actors playing these European characters?
Yeah, it doesn't bother me because it is just supposed to be a Spanish language version of the same movie. It's not like it's supposed to be like a different adaptation of the book or anything. And the Universal monsters are already monster movies are already kind of like never-worldy in like the timeline. The time period doesn't make any sense, and you're never quite sure like where things are. Like how do people get on a train from America and wind up in England? Like weird shit like that is always happening.
When does that happen?
So it's already... Oh, here it is right here. Look at this.
Right, yeah, this shot's not in the original, obviously, and that's great.
Yeah. And give it up to Carlos Villarreal for standing. He has great posture. He's
for standing very still.
Well, no, the way he was standing, he had a kind of... it was good body language. He provided a sort of swagger there that maybe isn't in the Lugosi version at this point, in the film. No, but yeah. So as I was saying, the Universal monster universe is already like really weird, and there are just things that don't make sense about it. So the fact that there are all these Spanish people in Transylvania is easy enough to write off for me.
But what movie had somebody getting on a train that went from America to England? When did that happen?
Oh, that actually happened in Young Frankenstein, but that's meant as like a spoof on like the weird like shit that doesn't make sense in these movies.
Right. Well, I think the idea there is that he got on a train to an airport and then flew there. I get it, but you know, I was just trying to remember if like that. I believe it. I just was trying to remember if it actually happened in one of these movies. But
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised to find out that it did.
No. But the weirder thing is fucking Lon Chaney being Claude Rains' son.
Yeah. I mean, well, it depends on how long he was in America for. Because, like, I mean, I have an uncle who was born and raised here and then moved to Ohio, and he's lived up there for years now. And you wouldn't know that he's Southern to speak to him now because he's acquired the accent and everything.
Even age-wise, it seems a little off, though.
Yeah,
Claude Rains is a little too young to be his dad. It's a little bit like Sean Connery in Last Crusade, but not as bad. Like, Sean Connery is too young to be Harrison Ford's dad. They're only 12 years apart. So, it's kind of a...
But I think he looks...
Yeah, he looks a lot old. They made him look older in that, but even still...
Well, and they look farther apart in age than they actually are, you know, anyway.
Right. Not so much the case with Claude Rains and Lon Chaney Jr.
Like, I don't even know if Harrison Ford now looks as old as, like, Sean Connery in some movies. Maybe it's just the beard that makes him look older. But
Harrison Ford's in, like, crazy good shape still. Sean Connery is not.
Yeah, he's looking good in those Blade Runner 2049 trailers, gotta say. Way to.
I mean, he's supposedly coming back to play Indiana Jones, so he must be in good-ish shape.
I just hope he gives a shit about it, unlike the last time, you know. Like, I'm really hoping that the way he got his groove back in Star Wars will carry over to him reprising all these other famous roles of his.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm hoping that he's not using it as a crutch, you know?
Yeah.
Where suddenly he's back and he's just going to revisit all the old roles. He's going to play fucking Jack Ryan again, you know?
I just realized we're probably going to go on a lot of tangents in this commentary because for a lot of it, it's like, yep, this happened in the English version. Already talked about it. So how about that Boo saga?
But yeah, there's a lot of moving shots in this that are not in the original, and I think that just gives the whole thing a better sense of scope and confidence. When you move the camera in big open sets like this and in a talkie like this, it's very impressive because it's easier to stay locked in, keep the mics in a good place, so that way you can capture all the dialogue and get everybody's facial expressions. It's just easier. But this takes the risk of moving around and giving us a better scope for everything.
Well, it's also really impressive because it lets you appreciate these fantastic sets that, you know, they had to build because this is 1931. They can't composite a bunch of, like, disparate set elements together. They can't have a chair in a green room.
CGI castles and shit.
They can't have a chair in a green room and then the entire Hobbit trilogy comes out of that. Like, they can't do that shit yet. So if there's going to be a big, elaborate castle, they've got to build the damn thing.
And it was probably, like, based on, like, another castle they already had from another movie, but it looks very distinct. And the Dracula castle from this movie is obviously very iconic. He does look like a Hispanic version of Bela Lugosi, like, in the structure of his head, but his facial expressions are too soft. Like, he's too, like, traditionally, like, okay looking, you know? Like,
yeah, I'm sure he probably got the part because out of all the Spanish actors that they were looking at for it, he was the most Lugosi looking.
Yeah. But even still,
sure
his expressions are too soft and too normal looking.
Like, I don't mean to play down his performance here and say that he didn't, like, wow them in a like audition or something, but I'm sure that played a part in it. especially considering that this is 1931. So it would be a whole lot more like, we need a guy who looks like the other guy.
Well, yeah, I'm sure they found a middle ground, somebody who looked like him and could also play the part well. And they did a fine job. Like, he's good, but he's just not as good. And again, they probably shouldn't have bothered trying to force him to line up with Lugosi, you know?
And the other problem is, like I was saying, he tries to do the whole charming thing, and it just doesn't work as well. Like, I never buy that somebody would trust him.
That expression was ridiculous when he opened up his mouth, and he just doesn't pull off the whole creepy thing as well as Lugosi did. I liked that expression where he looked really disappointed. Like, that was awesome.
He's too creepy to be charming, and he's too goofy to be scary.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's this weird middle ground.
But I think he has the body language down, and that's why I say he's not a terrible Dracula. It's just in comparison. That's one of the great lines from the Lugosi version. I never drink wine.
He's not being very subtle about the fact that he's a vampire, but it's like, I don't know why he's even bothering with any pretense. Like, he's just gonna murder this dude anyway, or not even murder him, but he's gonna take control of him anyway. Like, he has no reason to fear Renfield, like, you know,
I mean, that's
being
kind of
a danger
problem.
to him, you know?
That's a problem in any adaptation of Dracula. Well, even in the source material, that's the inherent sort of conceit of the story. Is that why doesn't Dracula just like sneak up behind Renfield and bite him like the minute he comes into his castle or something, you know? Or just break his
but I guess the idea is just that he's securing his real estate, so that's why he doesn't just murder him.
I suppose.
And at least in this version, he uses him as like a slave, so it makes sense that he kind of hangs on to him.
The way that they wrote around it in the Hammer version is, of course, that Harker, rather than being a real estate agent, was coming to the castle to work as the librarian. And so there was like a pretense for him being there for a while.
Well, he also was like planning on killing Dracula anyway.
Well, yeah. But Dracula didn't know that, or did he? Bum, bum, bum.
He did.
Also, Harker in Horror Dracula, another better Renfield than this Renfield.
Yeah. Suddenly the film quality just got a lot worse.
Yeah. You know, they restored these movies, but there are some things that are just...
There's something we should talk about. This was actually lost for a long time. You know, it had its initial release in 1931, and then it was lost until 1970, when somebody found a version of it and it was restored. And since then, it was released on VHS in the 90s, and again, all the legacy releases of the Universal monster movies, it's had a release for. So,
yeah, I wonder if the transfer we're watching is from the DVDs or from the Blu-rays, because I don't remember this drastic drop in quality on the Blu-ray, but I've only ever watched this version once before.
I don't know. We got it from the International Space Satellite in space, so who knows? Oh my, he did not need to see him splayed.
No. Why are his pants pulled up so high? Like, where is his waist?
Ah! They definitely didn't try to get a Spanish guy who looked like Dwight Fry.
I don't think you can.
This dude is just having a mental breakdown right now for no reason. See, now they're just looming over him, like obviously gonna do some bad shit to him. They don't even care. So wait, did he take the crucifix off? Because otherwise, how are they going to get at him?
That's interesting that in this version, Dracula doesn't shoo the vampire female.
They cut a lot out there. Yeah, Dracula's straighter in this version.
Well, no, what I think it is this version is a lot more sexy than the English language version.
Right.
We'll see that later on with the actresses and how they're dressed. But
Right. The Bela Lugosi version is more predatory. This guy's more of a fucking rapist. Oh, this is very different from the English version.
again, English version, Spanish version, could they not afford fangs in 1931?
Yeah. Because the face on him just doesn't work.
Okay, so that shot is from the English version.
Yeah. It totally works with what we just saw.
Still a great shot.
I like the English version better, though, where we don't see him. What do you think, Mexican English person? He looks a lot different now, though, to be fair. Maybe we didn't give this guy enough credit.
Well, like I said, to be fair, Dwight Fry isn't that interesting in before he goes crazy either.
He's a lot pudgier than Dwight Fry. I think visually he just doesn't stand out as much as that character. Because Dwight Fry has that very distinctive, like, skinny, sleek physique. This guy is very pudgy. But performance-wise, he's going over the top for sure.
Yeah. He's less subdued than Dwight Fry, interestingly enough.
Yeah, because Dwight Fry lets out his manic nature more gradually. This guy just literally was like, ah!
Yeah, and you could tell that Dwight Fry was like consciously laughing in a creepy way, whereas this guy's just like, blah!
I wonder if they're ever going to figure out why everybody in London has started speaking Spanish all of a sudden.
Maybe this takes place in an alternate timeline where Spain really did well in the Middle Ages.
I believe it. If you're gonna if you're ever gonna take over England, that's the time to do it.
Timeline where Spain was never conquered by the Muslims in whatever century that was, and so they were able to focus on expansion rather than getting their land back.
What a magical history lesson this has been. Hey, look, a car, when we were just seeing, like, carriages and shit before. What era is this? Who knows? Well, no, I mean, that's fine. I guess the idea is just, it's the present day, but in London, they have cars, and they can, have all this more modern convenience, and often Dracula's old homeland, they still use the old ways. So, that distinction is just visually represented, so it works well.
This movie didn't have the Dracula killing the girl on that street corner like we saw in the English version.
Dracula has done very little Dracula-ing so far, outside of murdering all the people on the boat, which we didn't see at all.
I think they swapped out that scene from the English version for him being on the boat in this version.
He's trying really hard to look like Bela Lugosi. Look at the way he's looking at her, though. Isn't that all? Like, that's very powerful.
To the cinematographer's credit in this movie, I think they realized that he didn't have the hypnotic eyes that Lugosi has. And so whenever they do those close-ups, they do it from a different angle, and it is pretty effective.
Look at the shadows cast over his eye.
It's still not the Lugosi stare, but the angle that they do those close-ups at, it still works, I probably should have just had Lugosi in both versions. Let him learn his Spanish lines phonetically.
He didn't know English anyway, so...
Yeah.
Why not? I have to go figure out why we're all speaking Spanish. That's what the telephone call is about. It's always interesting to see, like, the first Dracula story and like, whenever somebody redoes the story, because you're in this world where nobody knows the name Dracula. Because, usually when you drop the name Dracula in something, it's like a, But in this context, it's like, oh, I'm Dracula. And it's like, oh, well, what a cheerful fellow this Dracula must be. We always associate it as this horrible, monstrous name.
Yeah. Unless a character is familiar with Romanian history, they wouldn't have any reason to raise an eyebrow at that name.
Realistically, he probably shouldn't use his real name, or I mean, that's not even really his real name. But if we're going on the idea that he's Vlad Tepes, but still, like, you're right. If somebody really thought about it for more than 2 seconds, they could put it together who he is, and that probably wouldn't be great for him. I mean, not that that would make him any less powerful or whatever, but even still. He totally stole that guy's seat. So, do they speak Spanish in Transylvania too?
I'm telling you, man, Spain did very well in this universe.
That is a very white-looking Jonathan Harker.
Maybe he's Spanish.
Maybe, yeah. But his wife is definitely not.
Or possibly even Argentinian. There's a huge white population in Argentina. Because they're more actually descended from the settlers rather than the crossbreeding between the settlers and the natives, It's interesting. There's smatterings of white people all through South America for that very reason. Not everybody is descended from the natives. Some of them are more directly descended from the people who were killing the natives.
Right. Which is your more Spanish from Spain line. They don't make us sit through as much of the music in this version, which I guess is also better. I think you can say that this version is better paced. We'll see how that goes, because it is longer. So I'm wondering when we're going to start feeling the length, because so far they've been taking stuff out, not putting stuff in.
Well, we had the thing on the boat, which was different. I really think a lot of it, though, is just moving the camera takes more frames than cutting it,
Yeah, I mean, it still adds, they added 25 minutes, It's a considerable amount.
I also wonder how much of it is, the pacing of the Spanish language as opposed to the English,
Well, I mean, Spanish is quicker.
Not in this very dramatic way.
Have you never been yelled at by a Spanish girl? I mean...
But they're using it in a very, slow, sort of dramatic way. Listen to them talk.
It's prim and proper. It's not like being yelled at by, a little Latina Spitfire.
Yeah. Well, some of their words are, way longer than the English words. It just depends. You want to go to a shoe store, you got to say zapateria. Fuck that.
And bathroom is Cuatro de Baño. That's fucking wild, The room of the bath. That's what that means.
This is why, despite having taken 3 years of Spanish in high school and having been at one point...
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how many years did you take?
3, and at one point I was actually kind of decent at like comprehending it, maybe not so much speaking it. You know, I was a little bit of a Peggy Hill when it came to speaking it, but comprehending it, fine. But like now, I remember like maybe 10%.
Yeah. I took 5 years of it, 2 years in middle school and then 3 years in high school, and remember none of it.
I should really get back into learning German because I have much more of an inherent talent for that than I do Spanish, it seems.
Yeah, comprehending it, I'm better at as well. Like I also, at work, I deal with people who speak all kinds of languages, but Hispanic is definitely the one that's the most prominent. So I know a lot of the basic stuff just from inference, context clues.
The most useful phrase you could ever learn in Spanish, and honestly, the only one that you really need is no hablo español.
Right. Oh, this is exactly the same as the English language version. Look at Van Helsing. Look at little Hispanic Van Helsing. He looks like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good comparison. I don't know. I'm at a loss, but he doesn't look like Van Helsing.
Which one is supposed to be Van Helsing anyway?
The guy on the left. Well, wait, maybe not. Wait, the guy. Yeah, I think that's what I would imagine. Is the guy on the right really supposed to be Van Helsing?
I don't know. Is it really supposed to be the little Hispanic Bob Hoskins looking guy over there?
Yeah, that's who I think. That's who I would imagine.
I don't think so.
Oh, there he is. Never mind.
Yeah, nobody in that scene was Van Helsing.
Fuck. That's definitely him though. They definitely got like Hispanic Edward Van Sloan.
Yeah. And I think he probably stacks up against his English counterpart better than Hispanic Dracula does against Lugosi.
He's got the charisma and the slow, intimidating wisdom Edward Van Sloan had.
Well, I think it's just an easier thing to pull off to be this, enigmatic, kind of charismatic old man as opposed to this bizarre creature of the night.
Right.
With a very specific sort of cadence.
Well, there was probably more pressure on Carlos Villarreal to be as good, if not better, than Bela Lugosi, and I think that the stress and pressure of that just really soured his odds at succeeding.
Well, I think that's why he and the director were the ones who were allowed to look at what the English crew had filmed, because for him it was a matter of trying to approximate Lugosi's performance.
Whereas here, this guy playing Van Helsing is literally just adapting the character from script to his performance, and I think that gives him more ability to make the idea of him his own, as opposed to trying to recapture what somebody else did with him. How come places that hold crazy people always have to have alliterative titles? Arkham Asylum, Seward Sanitarium. What's up with that?
Yeah, they always have to be alliterative?
Yeah. It attracts the crazy people, I guess. Yeah, he is a lot less subdued than Dwight Fry. He's just screaming at the spider.
Dwight Fry is like movie person crazy, like an early Anthony Hopkins type of playing crazy. This guy is like real person, like just screaming at everything. Bipolar, like now he's just super quiet. Like Dwight Fry, you believe, put him in a sanitarium, lock that man up. This guy, you're like, he's just like a New York hobo. Like, what the...
Does he look more wiry to you now? He doesn't look as pudgy.
See, I didn't have the pudgy thing before that you were talking about, so I don't know.
I totally saw pudgy earlier. He looks a lot more wiry now. His eyes are wider. He's got these big rings under them.
You think maybe they're doing a thing with makeup to try and make him look like he's been in a mental hospital for an amount of time? Although he shouldn't have
Maybe. If
been.
so, they're doing a good job. And better than... I mean, he shouldn't look this different, but he's got the influence of Dracula on him, so who knows?
Oh, of course, that guy that we were looking at before, that we thought was Van Helsing, that's the Seward guy. With the mustache and the...
That makes a lot more sense. Yeah, let's bring this patient in.
What?
This guy they found on a boat filled with corpses. Like, let's bring him in unrestrained, you know?
Look how much a Spanish sanitarium worker loves his job.
Yeah, he looks really into it. Oh, I thought
Wouldn't it be funny?
I thought he was gonna sit down. Like, oh, I'll get up if you need me.
Wouldn't it have been hilarious if he had also had a Cockney accent?
That would have been great. Because the guy from the first... That guy was great in Dracula 31, that sanitarium worker. This guy, he just looks very upset.
I brought you a fucking crazy person, I have. This guy is just like, I hate my job.
Yeah, Renfield is a lot better now, though. I think he kind of went through the exact same arc as Dwight Frye, where like initially he was just kind of boring 30s lead. Now he's, you know, this more varied, visually engaging madman.
I'm getting a kick out of that guy in the background. He's like the Spanish equivalent to get off my plane, Harrison Ford.
The glasses on Hispanic Van Helsing make him look like 10 times nerdier. He has like these weird bug eyes, you know?
Yeah. His face isn't as narrow as Eddie Van Sloan's, I don't think. So they don't stick out as much, but they seem to fit really well, you know?
I wonder if it's the same glasses.
Like I said, I'm pretty sure they probably just recycled all the same costumes because I'm telling you, the studio is not
Same
wasting.
underwear? Because of the smaller budget, I'm wearing Edward Van Sloan's underpants. He had bad skid mark problems. Very unpleasant.
He's very arousing. No, I'm pretty sure they probably get their own boxers.
You would hope. I like the way they taste. The aerial power of the psychic faculties. Huh. He's not a fucking transformer, sanitarium worker. What kind of fucking idiot are you?
I had the strangest dream that we were all white and had slightly different names. Oh, Juan Harker.
Oh, Juan.
Juan Harker.
But they're all still living in England. I guess it's fine. I guess there were Hispanic people in England. It's just funny that's the way it's got to be.
He's the Juan for her.
I'm just gonna ignore that. It's interesting they didn't change it to like Dracula, you know, because it's a Hispanic version. El Dracula.
Oh, Juan, I keep having this dream that I'm old and I'm hosting a special feature on a Universal Monster DVD. What's a DVD?
I can never sleep in the middle of the night. I just get up and I walk around.
my favorite line from Mel Brooks, Dracula Dead and Loving It. I was having a daymare.
They are so gonna platonically hug each other.
I don't know, this is the Spanish version, so they might platonically, I don't know, whatever the
Get
slightly
it
more sexy,
on!
whatever the slightly more sexy version of hugging is.
A blowjob. No, it's just
Maybe a bit of the old pat pat squeeze squeeze.
he's just gonna start groping her tits. He's like, this is just like hugging, right? I guess. This happens in every, like, story where there's, like, a wolf or some kind of monster in London. Or it's like, what kind of predator is in England? There's no kind of predator like this in England. No wolves, no no creatures that can kill or make noises like that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are wolves in other parts of England. You'd think that they would just assume that a wolf might, wander into the city. Like, it's not that far out of left field.
Or it could just be like a rabid dog or whatever. Or it could have escaped from a zoo.
Like, typically you don't find black bears in my part of Tennessee. They're typically further east in the Appalachians. But occasionally one gets spotted closer in my direction because they just wander sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, it's fine. They're animals. I've seen armadillos around here. Like, what the fuck is up with that? They're supposed to be out in fucking, like, Texas or whatever. He's frightened by the cross. I've discovered the problem, Dr. Seward. Clearly, he's a flaming homosexual.
Ha!
I shall remedy this in my office immediately.
By fucking him. No. That'll teach him.
By showing him what it means to be a man. And also shock treatments. So many shock treatments. It is 1931 after all.
We do that just because we can. Ah, yes, this is marijuana.
Inish Van Helsing has got some, like, major fucking eyebrows going on.
Yeah, those things are alive, son.
They kind of complement the giant glasses, actually.
He definitely has a very distinct look. I'll definitely say that.
He's a little bit more plump than Eddie Van Sloan.
They're all taller. Which is interesting because the stereotype is that Latin American folks tend to be shorter.
Well, could it just be the way they're being filmed?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe they're all midgets and they're making the sets make them look bigger.
They use movie magic to make Tom Cruise look taller.
The sets are the same though. The sets are the same.
Yeah, but like you could film somebody from a slightly lower angle and make them look taller. I mean, there's lots of things you can do. I don't know.
This is pre-Tom Cruise. He defined that though.
I'm not saying that that's what they're doing. I'm just saying they could have been doing it, although it doesn't appear that way. Is it a stereotype for Mexicanos that they're shorter? I always knew that about Asians, and I can certainly believe it. Being friends with one as we are, that he's a very short person.
Yeah, but totally. There's definitely a stereotype out there for that.
And that's coming from me, who has a very skewed view of who's short or not based on my own height.
Right, right. So maybe maybe I also have that, but I've heard that as a stereotype.
That makes sense. David's a little dude too, isn't he?
He is.
Interesting.
He's a monkey man.
I'm going to challenge myself now to think of a tall Spanish person.
Armando Santo.
Is George Lopez tall? There's no way, right?
He's like middle-aged height, I guess. Like mid-range, I meant to say. Middle-aged.
I think he's the Mexican Alec Baldwin in that his head is getting bigger the older he gets.
Right.
And I don't mean that in like an ego way.
Although that too. See, this is I mean, I think this one has, while it's certainly superior visually, it has a lot of the same narrative problems of people standing around talking for too long.
Right. Well, obviously it's based off the same, a translation of the same script. I mean, so that's going to be there. Although I don't remember that weird line about the flies and shit from Renfield in the English version. Maybe I'm just blanking on that. So maybe it is a bit more than just a literal translation. What is going on here? Always looking at her dick, I was about to say.
They have to stop looking at each other's dicks.
My God, I've just realized my daughter has titties.
What a shocking revelation to a man.
I shall handle this situation in my office immediately.
He just goes to his office to deal with every personal and professional issue. I have gallbladder stones. I must go to my office to deal with this. My wife is cheating on me. I must go to my office. Uh-oh, he's trying to be charming again, D. We better run.
It was a little odd to see Dracula show up without the cape in this version.
He's like, hey, man, I'm Dracula. How you doing? Hi there, I'm here to cast suspicion on myself.
Van Helsing? Yes, we've all heard of Professor Van Helsing.
So tell me, Mr. Van Helsing, do you believe in vampires? What's an oddly specific question?
For your information, Professor Van Helsing is the foremost expert on the occult. And also the treatment of homosexuals.
So come to my office and we will deal with it. The office of Van Helsing is just a swinging door of mail calls, you know? Count Dracula's sexy musk has made me feel better. You know what the big problem is with this movie? They cast a really unattractive Jonathan Harker, or Juan, as he's known. Because in the other version, like, at least Jonathan Harker is still, like, a good-looking dude. You know, Dracula is still, obviously, Bela Lugosi and young, attractive, foreign-looking Bela Lugosi. You know, when he was still young and mysterious and had that dark look about him. You know, this guy is just like the guy playing Juan in this movie. He just looks like a high school dropout, you know? He's got bad hair, bad teeth, a bad face. He has a very narrow face. He looks like he was beaten up a lot, you know?
So what you're saying is that you're not a fan.
No. I feel like everybody emphasizes their sadness a lot more in this movie. Like whenever they look into something and they feel dread, they're always just like, oh God. They always emphasize that face more.
I think that's a Spanish acting thing. Because, like, Mexican soap operas are famous for being, like, way more overdramatic than American soap operas, which is saying a lot.
Do you think that everybody in this is trying harder? Like trying maybe a little too hard?
Look
at that face.
I don't know if they're trying too hard. I think it's just a different style of acting. This is also the 30s, where the American people were very melodramatic as well. So.
That's true. So maybe it's this. So maybe it's. I'm not saying it's any better or worse than the American version. I'm just saying it's the same. Which I guess is the point of this entire commentary.
Look how this is the movie again. Isn't that neat?
They're all exactly the same height. I don't know why I noticed that, but I did. Dracula's slightly taller. But Spanish Edward Van Sloan and Seward are about the same size. Look how ugly Juan is. Like, Jesus. Like, if your daughter brought that home, you'd be like, sweetheart, please don't. Don't let that man do anything to you.
You're really hung up on this one guy.
I hate him.
I don't think he's going to win any awards or anything, but...
I hope that Spanish Edward Van Sloan steals Ava away from Juan. No, not all my joints!
I think Spanish Edward Van Sloan would be more interested in stealing Juan away from Ava.
You make a solid argument.
Based on the caricature of him that we have painted.
That's true. Dr. Seward, please accept my apologies, but I'm a narc. Those are Cuban joints. Those are illegal in this country. Wow, that face. Huh.
Cuban joints aren't illegal in this country. This is London?
This is Spanish London. Spanish occupied London.
Oh.
Circa 1931. The famous Spanish occupation of 1931.
Yeah, son, we took this shit Red Dawn style.
Oh. The Spanish people took all the white people as slaves. They're all off working in the fields right now, while the Spaniards are up in the houses dealing with the Draculas.
They're English people, like proper English people, yelling at their sons, "Avenge me!"
Lucia Weston. You're right, they have exactly the same costumes, because Juan is wearing exactly the same outfit as Jonathan.
Yeah, it's all the same, man.
Those little poofy pants at the bottom. If you were going to wear any eccentric, like, older kind of outfit, what would it be? Would you wear, like those big poofy trousers like the old-time English people used to wear? Would you wear a cloak like Dracula? A nice dress like Ava?
I don't know how eccentric this is, but I once tried on a top hat at a big flea market type thing. They had a top hat, and I tried it on, and you know what? It suited me surprisingly well.
I've always been cool with like a fedora. I've always wanted to do like a big, wide-brimmed fedora or something like that.
See, the problem with fedoras now is they get this sort of cultural stank on them, you know?
Right.
The top hat, on the other hand.
But
Aside from
I
being
want it to look old and dusty and used, you know?
Whatever happened to the cape, man? Why don't people wear capes anymore?
Yeah, I would probably go with the Dracula look. I would wear the cape. I wouldn't go.
People
I wouldn't
to
go
wear
for poofy pants.
That was a thing that they did. I mean, it probably wouldn't be very practical. You could get it caught in a revolving door or a laundry press or something, but
I've also always wanted an occasion to dress up in like old-timey style, nice clothes, you know? Like the bow tie and the button-up vest and the long dinner coat. But I've never found the reason to put the effort into it, you know? Why are they letting the crazy people run rampant? This is just like Arkham Asylum. But they don't have a Batman to stop it. That's the problem. The Batman in this is a villain, too.
what about swords? People used to just walk around with swords. Like, that was just a thing they did.
If they were walking around with swords in this, their position would probably be better. But because they don't have swords, this crazy person is causing problems. They should just stab him. Because that's what they would do if they had swords. Juan here would just be like, ah!
You make a strong argument.
Thank you. I'm just advocating for sword use in day-to-day life.
I can tell you a lot of thought.
I just think that social interactions would be much simpler if we all had swords on us at all times.
Yes, because there's an element of skill to it. Anybody can have a shootout, but can you outfence another man?
Yeah, that's true. Like, swords are better inherently. But you know what? It's easier to swing around a sword than to fire a gun.
Is it?
If you fire a gun at a person, I feel like your odds are you're not going to hit them. You know, like, because you probably won't even pull the trigger right. I've never fired a gun. I do imagine that one day I will give it a go, and I imagine the first time I do it, I'll probably barely be able to pull the trigger. So I'll inevitably miss whatever my target is. So I imagine anybody who fires a gun initially will have a similar experience.
Well, nobody's good on their first time, but that's why you practice, Bill.
Well, obviously. But that's what I'm saying here. Like, if we're talking about people just walking around with guns, like, okay, like, let's say they don't have any experience when they initially pull them out, you know? So you're just wobbling around trying to figure out how to use the thing. With a sword, I think it's a lot easier to just whip it out and just start flailing it at the person. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but there's a whole lot more physical exertion involved.
Sure. I think that's why they're better, because it's more demanding physically. I think skill-wise, I guess it's probably about the same, no?
No. Well,
No?
with guns, it depends on the range, because if you're right up on a person, you can just fucking shoot them. It's no problem. But if you're having
the shorter the range, like a pistol, it's like the stopping power, you know, it's...
If you're having a shootout with somebody at like a fair distance, then there's skill involved, because then it's about aiming and, you know, taking cover and shit like that.
Gun kata style, where it's like close up and you have to dodge and fire at the same time.
But with a good sword by your side, man, it's all about the fencing. It's all about the moves. It's all about your style, you know.
You're a fan of like John Pertwee and the Master fencing and like that era of Doctor Who?
I'm a fan of any fencing in anything ever.
Do you like Zorro?
I haven't watched a Zorro movie in a long time, but yeah, they're fun.
I love Zorro. We should review some Zorro on DFOS. There's a lot of good recent Zorro comics that are... There's a Zorro Dracula crossover.
Of course there is. Who hasn't Dracula crossed over with at this point?
Yeah, I mean, he's a public domain character, and a popular one at that. Thus, he's been used a lot of the time. Sherlock Holmes has fought him on several occasions.
Here's the crossover we need. Dracula versus Dracula. Who will win?
That would be interesting. Wouldn't it be interesting if there were like multiple vampires who were calling themselves Dracula, and they were all like different versions that we've seen in different media?
you imagine betting
we
on that fight?
We had like Alucard from Helsing versus like Christopher Lee's Dracula versus like Bela Lugosi versus like Blackula. That would be amazing. Versus like the Dracula from Castlevania, who's like crazy powerful. So here's what is extended, I'm realizing. This bit with Renfield. All the stuff in the house with Renfield is a little longer than in the American version. At least it feels that way. Oh, and this takes place outside. This little bit. Look how fucking sad he looks.
It's an interesting take on that scene where Dwight Frye crawls up on that lady. They had him come up from the side this time.
And she's already unconscious. There was no moment where they stared at each other.
That was a deep sigh.
Juan doesn't look that relieved. The fuck?
She's alive, but she is in great danger. I'll have to examine her in my office.
Hey, that's his fucking... That's her father. Spanish Edward Van Sloan should be examining her in his office. He swings both ways. Ava, listen. Has Dracula been intimate with you? As he has been with me?
The aliens abused him. Sexually.
Aliens and vampires.
That was certainly the case with the vampires of Venice.
I was literally thinking about that exact same thing. I was going to say, well, what if you did a version of vampires where they were aliens? I was like, oh yeah, the vampires of Venice did that. Although they weren't really vampires at all. Did they even suck blood?
I think they did.
Yeah, I think they did too.
But they was fish.
Well, they were fish, and they also were sensitive to sunlight because they were deep sea fish.
Yeah.
That was a good episode. I like the Vampires of Venice.
Yeah. Not like a great episode, not like a top tier type episode, but pretty entertaining.
Mm-hmm. The Doctor is a character who has never straight up met Dracula. Like, Dracula is a fictional character in Doctor Who, it seems.
I don't know, has that never happened in like a comic or anything?
It probably has, but I'm saying in canon, or whatever the canon may or may not actually be.
Yeah, whatever canon is in Doctor Who.
That's what I mean. But he's fought such similar characters, like it doesn't even matter. There's a lot of attempts to do like the classic Universal monsters in Doctor Who, like the brain of Morbius is Frankenstein, and the Pyramid of Mars is the Mummy.
There was that werewolf in season 2 of New Who.
Mm-hmm.
That was less of like a Universal style werewolf.
And then Vampires of Venice is your vampires. I don't know what I don't know if they ever did like a Dracula thing. I don't know, but none that I remember. But
there's something in classic Who involving some kind of a vampire thing, but I don't think they did Dracula. And I think they were like space vampires or something. I don't know. I've never seen it.
Mm. Who's this dude now?
One thing you'll notice if you're watching along with us at home, one example of where the costumes in this film are different. The women in this movie are dressed far more provocatively by 1931 standards,
Thank
mind you,
fucking God.
than their English compatriots.
It's a beautiful thing. Perhaps the only reason to watch this version.
Again, it's by 1930s standards, so it's still not like, take it off, but it's, it's something.
Hey man, sometimes it's the subtlety that counts. He's got a little bow tie on. They're all dressed to like go to the opera, like all the time. Like they're all constantly ready to go to the opera.
Oh, I think this version actually makes it clear that they went and staked Lucy, because in the English version they never really resolve that plot thread. She's just sort of walking around in one scene and then they never revisit it. I think they actually take that care of that in this version, which if so, that's a major oversight of the other version that they've fixed.
Well, we'll see. We're slowly getting to the end.
Bill, can you ever imagine a scenario in which you would watch this version of the film again, after doing this commentary, or are you quite satisfied with the English version as far as rewatching goes?
If I ever do sit down and rewatch a version of this movie, it will probably be this one because I'm the least familiar with it. But I prefer the English version, yeah. Personally, simply because of Bela Lugosi and Edward Van Sloan. Everything else I can kind of take or leave, because everything else I can kind of take or leave in this version, outside of the cinematography.
Yeah.
Again, it's an interesting thing to watch, and it's nice that we have it. I'm really glad that we have it, but it's outside of a really interesting curiosity piece and an example of how a little forethought in the early days of cinema went a long way to making something stand out in terms of the all the camera moves, as we've mentioned. It's just kind of okay, Oh, so they already know Dracula's a vampire. Oh, well, obviously they already saw the reflection earlier. The lack of a reflection, I should say.
There's always a maid character in this Batman in these Dracula movies.
In these Batman movies.
In these Dracula movies, who's told, don't open that window no matter what. And then the girl on the bed will be like, please open the window. And then the maid will be like, okay. And then they'll open the window. And then later on, when the girl's dead, they'll be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't follow your instructions. I opened the window. It happens every fucking time.
And then we see the bit where the window's open, the bat comes in, materializes into Dracula, the girl wakes up, and she's just like, "Oh, hello there, Mr. Batman."
But what we never see is the maid who had one fucking job and fucked it up
To
so badly
not open the window, yeah.
and fucked it up so badly that the person died. We never see her get like fired or anything.
Just has to be inferred. You can never get good help these days.
I want to see a version of this story where Seward gets fucking mad at that maid. He slaps her around a little bit. And
I want to see the realistic version of this movie. This is 1930s Hollywood, though. We're not asking for realism. We're just asking for Draculas. His hypnotic stare is starting to grow on me as the movie has gone on.
Yeah, what they do is they film it from an angle instead of straight on like they do the Lugosi one, and it manages to, I don't know, it works better for his face.
They're doing different stuff with it. The lack of fangs really hurts this Dracula, though, just like Lugosi's. But Lugosi's, it's not as noticeable.
Well, he makes up for it in other ways.
Yeah, but they really need fangs. Do you think that was just a... Why do you think they didn't do fangs? This is pre-code.
Maybe they didn't have fang technology. Yeah.
I guess. Maybe they thought it looked ridiculous. But they've got Jack Pierce. I don't understand, man. I don't know why they didn't have him do something cool.
But at this time, Jack Pierce would have been working on Frankenstein.
Well, he could have dipped over. I'm like, oh, you guys need teeth? I can give you teeth. He ripped out his own teeth. They're like, oh, Jack, that's not what we meant. And it was like, this will be our starting place. I'm going to add these teeth onto both... We'll reuse them in Bella's mouth and in the Spanish guy's mouth.
Oh, you meant you want Teeth, the movie about the woman with the teeth in her vagina. Okay,
I've got that on Blu-ray. What is a Blu-ray?
First of all, Mr. Pierce, this is 1931, and that movie doesn't exist yet. Second of all, that sounds terrifying.
Having never seen a woman's vagina, I wouldn't know.
If you'll excuse me, I have to go to my office.
God, Renfield is all over this version.
Yeah, they really like this actor, don't they?
I feel like every second that's added onto this version is just Renfield listening to whatever's going on. You should have done that in the first place! Put him in a cell, you fucking idiot! Why are you letting him walk around? You're asking to be killed. You should be killed. You deserve to die. Everybody in your house deserves to die for your stupidity.
He has the strength of 10 mentally handicapped men.
That's a lot. He could fly over a cuckoo's nest. Literally.
Saw what you did there.
You sounded displeased.
Really? Did I sound displeased? That wasn't supposed to come off as displeasure.
Oh.
It was supposed to come off like, you scamp.
Well, glad. I'm good. Oh, wow. How the hell did he fit through there? Him and his big pudgy face. I'm not touching you. I'm definitely not touching you. Not touching you. His hand is way further away from her than it was a second ago. It's part of the hypnotism. Ooh. Oh, he hypnotized her to open the window. That's better. Okay, at least that makes sense now. Right?
I still want to see her get smacked around a little.
Pardon me?
I said I still want to see her get smacked around a little.
Oh my god. You're very extra tonight. See, this is like, what the fuck? Like Dracula, like Dracula flew in as a bat in the other version and like fucking made his entrance all creepy and shit. In this version, he literally has like a girl open a window for him and he just walks in. This version is so casual about it.
Maybe that makes him more of a pimp. You ever think of that?
I guess.
I don't know if pimp was a word in 1931, but if it had been.
Fishmonger was a word.
Okay.
That was a word that described pimps.
Ah, yes.
Sexual things.
I'm sorry, who's he doing?
It's always interesting when they describe colors of things in black and white movies. You know? When it's like, oh, it's a red mist. And I'm like, well, it didn't... Like, the fact that it was red did not come across to me at all until you described it as such.
It was the most wonderful shade of grayscale I've ever seen.
The shade of white was just as indiscernible as any other shade.
So vibrant. So shiny. So sterile.
So wonderfully the same as everything else. You think that your throat hurts right now. Imagine how this guy would feel at the end of every day after playing this character. He'd come home and just be like, my arms really hurt from shaking around a lot.
Don't get me started about that scene in Van Helsing's office.
They're on their way there right now.
Oh, God.
It's time for a 5-way.
This is the part where if there are any small children watching, I would advise that they cover their eyes.
I would advise that they get out a notepad and pen.
Take some fucking notes.
Oh my god, they finally restrained the crazy person. They did their jobs. Look at them.
What a novel concept.
Hey, man! What's going on, bro?
What was with that face?
I know, he looked so, like, disquieted.
I feel like that face was a meme, and this is 1931.
This is certainly pre-meme.
But it could have been a meme, you know what I mean?
I don't like it when people look at the camera, and that's what's going on, and I don't like it. Because they're looking at each other.
Even when the camera is supposed to represent the eyes of the other person.
It's always so off-putting. It's going on too long. There we go. Fucking thank you. Dracula took me to his office. Well, not yet. That's about to happen. I do apologize for the gaps in the silence here, but we're sort of watching the movie and realizing how much of it, we're trying to read the subtitles and see what's different. Mostly just names.
And the other interesting thing is that neither of us are totally familiar with this version of the film. I think we've each watched it once before, and so there's a lot of rediscovery going on right now.
There's a lot of like realizing that because it's on the same sets, it just bleeds into the other version so well in so many respects, and then in so many other ways it's so distinct.
Yes, like not as many people going into Van Helsing's office in the English version.
No. Oh, shit. See, this is the part where it's like, we better get the kids out of the room. We better get this ugly-ass fucking narrow-faced shit out of the way.
She's something about a quesadilla. Cause, I could
this guy looks like he's looking at her like she's a quesadilla.
I could really go for a quesadilla, not gonna lie, you know.
I'm not getting you a quesadilla.
Oh, why not?
Because by the time it would get to you, it would be too cold.
I have a microwave.
Problem solved. All right, I'll be back. Microwave solve all of our problems.
Can you imagine the absurdity of like airmailing somebody a quesadilla?
I wonder if I really wrapped it up right, if you could really microwave it and it would still be edible. You might. I mean, it'd only be like a 12-hour flight or drive if we did it overnight. Can't believe we're really talking about this.
Next time on DFOS, the experiment of the century.
I don't know if that's giving it either enough credit or too much credit. More of a hygienic experiment to see if you die when you eat it.
We've had this conversation before, though, about the cake. Remember the cake?
Yeah, one time it was a cookie.
Was it a cookie? Oh, yeah, the cookie. I feel like we're really fascinated about this concept of mailing somebody food.
Mailing food, yeah. I know people do it. I know people have mailed stuff that they've gotten from my job that's not meltable to other people.
But over vast distances?
Yeah, like to Pennsylvania,
Oh,
to
fuck that one.
Florida.
Pennsylvania doesn't deserve ice cream.
Ah! Run away! Dracula is a lot less graceful in this version, I feel. He does a lot of, like, screaming. And running around. It may get tangled in your hair. Oh my god, like that's the biggest problem in the world.
Real smooth.
Like, what does he plan to do if he gets his hands on the bat? Like, squish it?
Probably.
Like, great. Oh, you're gonna have bat guts all over your fucking hand. Great. Then you'll really be able to romance your lady, buddy. Good job.
Wouldn't it be less messy to grab the bat and then just twist its neck?
Or just, like, throw it? You don't even have to kill it. Killing it is gonna make a mess. You wouldn't be able to twist its neck in any assured way without, like, making it bleed. I couldn't anyway.
I know you kill birds that way. But
I've never killed a bird before, D.
At least it wouldn't be. It would only be bleeding from that one spot. It wouldn't be like fucking.
That's what I'm saying. Just throw it. You don't have to kill it. Just grab it and throw it.
But if you don't throw it, then it might come back.
It's not gonna come back. It's gonna be scared shitless.
If I catch a bat, I'm gonna be like, "Fuck you, bat."
I don't want to make a mess.
Realistically, we should just call the human male.
The bat busters.
He's a human male who bats are his.
She's trying to eat his narrow face.
I feel like he's the new Tom Holland. He's Hispanic butt face.
Yeah, Tom Holland is a lot better in every sense than this motherfucker.
Are you referring to actor Tom Holland or director Tom Holland?
Oh my god. I don't know.
I just took that to the next level, son.
Son.
Are you familiar with director Tom Holland?
Yeah, what did he do again?
He's famous for such movies as that one and the other one.
Great, thanks, D. Always helpful as always.
Hold on, now I'm gonna Google him real quick.
I've heard of him before. What did he do that I would be familiar with?
Oh, a lot of horror stuff. Child's Play, Fright Night, Thinner, Psycho 2.
Ah, there you go. Child's
Fright Night
Play.
Part.
Oh, well, they describe him feeding her his blood. We don't see that. We see that in the sexy Gary Oldman version, though.
In 1960, he directed a Speedy Gonzales cartoon called West of the Pesos.
We should do a commentary on that. Just
So that's some information that you now have. I can't believe Spider-Man directed Child's Play. That's really...
Tells you a lot about his psychology.
It's really fascinating. If there was ever a version of Spider-Man who would direct Child's Play, I believe that it's this one, you know.
He's the most childish. Because he's actually a child.
It's true. And so is his aunt. No, she is way younger than any other Aunt May, though. It's kind of off-putting.
It's kind of erotic.
Almost a shame that the Amazing Spider-Man films went as poorly as they did, because every now and then they had a good idea. Like Sally Field is a good casting idea for Aunt May, you know?
Yeah, she was a good idea. I do like Marissa Tomei a lot. And she does make more sense age-wise.
They've definitely gone Ultimate Spider-Man on that front.
No, she's even older in that, though. Like, she's
It's
still
true.
got gray hair.
They've gone even further. My God.
Yeah, but that was in, like, the 90s, you know? Or that would have made more sense. Like, nowadays, like, Aunt May would not look like that.
What's next? A white Nick Fury?
What's next? A white Falcon? A white Rhodey? Imagine they did that. They recast Rhodey again as a white guy.
The internet would lose its shit.
Listen, I'm here. Don't worry about it. Let's just move on.
God, the internet would lose its shit so hard.
They recast Tony Stark as a black girl teenager.
I kind of want it to happen now, just because I want to see the internet explode.
Let's go back to my crib, hon. They are establishing the hell out of this gate.
They are. Look at
There
that
we
damn
go.
gate. The sexy ass gate, man.
That's not a bad outfit. He kind
Don't
of
be
looks
hating
like the
on the gate.
Invisible Man.
Have you ever seen the Invisible Man television series from the 50s?
From the 50s? No. What's that about?
Because it's on Hulu, and I'm curious as whether or not it's any good.
No idea. I didn't even know that was a thing until you just brought it up.
Apparently, there's also one from the 90s.
The 90s one I'm more familiar with. That one's fucking weird. Because he's like a con. He's like a con man who is given the powers by the government to do stuff for them.
Interesting. Sounds a bit more like the Invisible Agent.
It's a little bit like the Bionic Man as well. And,
Yes, that's
and the invisibility he can turn on and off. It's like this weird, gross goo that goes over him. Of all the Invisible Man stuff you should watch Memoirs of an Invisible Man with Chevy Chase and Sam Neill. That's a fucking cool one.
Yes, I've heard of it. In that you reviewed it once, and I remember watching the review.
It was a long time ago. Murder. Dracula didn't really murder a lot of people in this movie.
Oh, the Renfield murder in this version is a lot more
Prominent.
intense, too.
Yeah. Renfield definitely gets a lot of the spotlight in this version. I think that's part of what makes it a little longer.
I guess I was wrong about them actually showing, taking care of the whole Lucy thing. I thought I had remembered that, but I guess not. Probably thinking of a different version.
There's still 6 minutes left for that to happen.
It won't. The serious problem with both versions of this movie. Like, what the fuck happened with Lucy? She's a vampire. She's walking around at night, and nobody addresses it.
I mean, if Dracula's destroyed, she would be destroyed anyway, because she's connected to him. So without him, there is no her. She returns to the dead.
Well, sure, if you establish that that's how vampires work in this universe.
I think that's just the implication, though. I agree with you, but...
I have seen stories where that is the case, but I also see many where that is not the case, so... Honestly, it's better if it's not the case, because at that point, if you stake a vampire who just happens to be the first vampire like ever in the history of mankind, then you've effectively destroyed all of the vampires.
It's an interesting weakness, though, that they would have to overcome. They would try to keep that secret, you would imagine. See, maybe this is when they stake her.
Aren't there werewolf things that are like that too, where like if you kill the person who turns you into a werewolf, then you stop being a werewolf?
Yeah, that's how Werewolf, the 90s TV show, did it. That was the whole point of it. He was traveling around trying to find the guy who turned him into a werewolf. Or no, it wasn't the guy who turned him into a werewolf. It was the guy who like turned all the people who turned him into a werewolf, you know?
Into a werewolf.
Right. He was like this horrible pirate-looking dude. Scorzini was his name.
No, see, they should have built up to that. They should have like had him kill the guy who made him into a werewolf at like the end of the first season, and then after that he's a human again. But he decides that he wants to go find the first werewolf so that he can save all the other werewolves. And so then the rest of the show would have been him as a regular human, but he's like hunting werewolves and shit, trying to find the main one.
That show was very cool stylistically and atmosphere-wise, but the werewolf in it, the design, the special effects just weren't there.
Hmm.
They tried to make it look like an American Werewolf in London type werewolf, but they didn't have the money for it.
Oh no, you can't do that on a TV budget. You've got to go with like a classic, well, you can do it on a TV budget now, but at the time, no. Because like Being Human did that pretty effectively, the UK version. I don't know about the US shitty version.
He's not, but like he's bipedal, but like the monstrousness of the werewolfness is very American Werewolf in London. There's Drac. Drac's back. Let's stab him in his dumb face. Vampires as a character always have a lot of weaknesses as well. That's one thing that I also always found more attractive about werewolves is that they don't have as many like straight up weaknesses as vampires, you know?
Since there are so many versions of vampires from so many cultures, and like so the modern vampire that we think of has sort of absorbed all of the different like weaknesses that all of those, and all of the folklore that they're based on have.
Also,
so they've got this whole
fiction always has to end with us killing them, so we want different ways to kill them.
The cool thing about a vampire, though, is that you can kind of, because there's so much more mythology, you get to kind of pick and choose with your version. So, like, if you want to have a vampire who has to ask permission to come into a house, but you don't want to bother with the whole running water thing, then fine. Nobody's gonna. It's even gotten to the point where you can have them walking around in the day if you want to. Pretty much the only standard thing that always has to work, as far as I've seen, is the whole staking thing.
They're mythological creatures who exist in the public consciousness, so you can do anything you want with them to achieve any end. So, and I think that that's totally cool. That's a big fucking stake, bro. See, when he dies in this version, she stops being a vampire. Or she stops becoming one, I guess is the better way to put it.
Yeah,
So
but she was never She was never fully a vampire, though.
No.
So it's not the.
So, but I think you can exaggerate it further, you know? To Lucy not existing anymore now that Dracula's dead. That's just my opinion anyway.
It's usually something that they cover, though.
See, they say they killed him with sunlight, but they staked him. But that's what they say they did. Huh. Let's contradict our own movie with our script as opposed to our fucking visual action. Great. Good job, guys.
You're both very traumatized. I'd better look you over in my office later.
Why couldn't he put fucking railing on these stairs?
So, I don't remember there being music at the end of the English version. I sort of just remember the English version stopping.
Finn. This also just sort of stops. That was a good last shot, though, at the end where they were all just standing in the corridor. So, Dylan, that was the 1931 Spanish version of Dracula. We were both sort of rediscovering it after a long time. What did you think of it?
Again, it's from a technical perspective superior to the English version. However, it does not have the one thing that really makes the English version great, which is, of course, the fact that they're speaking English. No, the performances from several key cast members, those being Dwight Frye, Edward Van Sloan, and most of all, Bela Lugosi. And that's why that version is super, super iconic and will always be so. And this version is just a really interesting footnote in the history of the Universal Monsters franchise.
Right. I agree with everything you said. That's why we're covering it. It stands out on its own as a interesting counterpoint to Dracula and everything else. And it's just interesting that they did this. You know, that they did this entire different production. You know, whether or not they would have continued to do this would have been interesting. I would have loved to have seen a Spanish version of Frankenstein. That would have been awesome.
That would have been fascinating.
So,
the Invisible Man.
Yeah, at the very least, it just in The Mummy, like that would have been that would have made zero sense.
It made about as much sense as this one.
Exactly, that's the thing. So, it's just fascinating and cool to talk about. So that's why we did it. So we hope you enjoyed. Is it better than Ghostbusters 2? Probably not. But you know what?
What did we say about the English version? The English version wasn't better than Ghostbusters 2, was it?
I would probably watch Ghostbusters 2 over the 1931 version of Dracula. But it doesn't really matter, because we have to watch a whole bunch of other classic Universal monsters. So we hope that you will continue to join us in the days ahead. But next up, as we alluded to before, we are heading to another ethnic region of the world. Dylan, what is the next Universal? Oh no, we're not. For some reason I keep thinking that The Mummy is next. It's not. It's. We're heading to another dark castle. Dylan, what's next up on the docket?
Join us next time as we are introduced to the other biggest name in Universal horror, Mr. Boris Karloff, with the also 1931 very busy year Frankenstein.
That's the thing that fucks me up, is it came out the same year as Dracula, whereas The Mummy is the following year. So
yeah, they were about that shit back in the day.
They were fucking popping these things out, son.
2 Kong movies in 33. The most amazing one to me is always the Damajan trilogy, 1966. Yep. Holy shit.
Yep.
3 movies.
They were really good at popping those things out back in the day. And hey, we're about to get 2 Avengers movies, one after the other, so Hollywood still does that shit. So
that's like part 1 and part 2 situation. That's a little different.
Well, they're not calling them that. They just seem to be like, well, this one happens, and then this one is the aftermath. So we'll see. Anyway, so until tomorrow when we talk about Frankenstein, I am Bill Worcester, aka Zazubaar.
And I am Super DM64.
And we did a commentary, what music it was. Good night.
Finally, there's a good outro for this series.